Sipping her hot coffee, Mira turned the pages of an old photo album filled with pictures from her childhood. Each picture took her back in time, making the memories feel fresh. It was as if she was reliving her past, remembering how dependent she was on her mother for every little thing. Today, she credited her mother for making her the woman she was, a good homemaker and now a mother herself. As she looked at the photos of her mother, they felt so real, as if her mother was right there, smiling at her. She remembered how beautiful her mom had been in her younger days, always wearing simple dresses, her long braid neatly hanging down her back, and a red hairpin that made her look so elegant. Going down memory lane, Mira felt warmth and love hidden in those pictures. She imagined the scent of roses filling the room, her mom's favorite flower, which she grew in the garden and wore in her hair every day. As she sat there, the scent became so strong and real that Mira didn't even notice when tears started rolling down her cheeks. Some photos made Mira smile, but others brought sadness because those golden days were gone forever. Mira had always admired her mother when she was alive, and she missed her deeply. Sometimes she wept alone, feeling insecure and lonely without her mother's support. Even when her mother's health was declining, she always kept a smile on her face. Mira knew her mother had seen her sadness, but she stayed strong because she wanted her daughter to learn to accept life's challenges. Mira was extremely close to her mom. She remembered sharing everything with her, from boys who would follow her home to her first crush. They would talk for hours, laughing at silly things. She felt closer to her mother than her older brother, Aaron, who was 22 at the time. He was 4 years older than Mira and was busy with school, friends, and his own life. He didn't spend much time at home, and their father was always away for work as an engineer. He rarely came home, and when he did, it was only for a couple of days before leaving again. Mira's world revolved around her mother, and her mother found peace and comfort in her daughter's presence. Her mom, though, wasn't very happy in her marriage. Many times Mira saw her crying in the bedroom. She also saw her writing in a diary, and every time Mira entered the room, her mom would quickly hide it. Mira often asked to read it, but her mother would say no, telling her it wasn't the right time. Mira respected her mother's wishes and didn't sneak a peek at the diary, though her curiosity grew. She always wondered what was in it, what her mother felt inside and why she sometimes cried. But she never gathered the courage to take the keys from under her mom's pillow, open the closet, and read the diary. One cold morning, loud cries filled the house. Mira was sobbing, and Aaron stood beside her, trying to comfort his younger sister. Their father had just come home, and his face showed complete shock. The night before, their mother, Rachel, had passed away in her sleep from a heart attack. No one had expected it. That morning, Mira had gone to bring the tea she and her mother drank together each day. When her mother didn't respond, Mira touched her hand and realized it was cold. Her mother was gone forever. Out of control with grief, Mira cried as if her soul was being torn apart. As they took her mother's body away, Mira screamed, but the hands that once comforted her were gone forever. Time passed. Mira finished college and started looking for a job, though her father wasn't happy with the idea. He saw how sad she was and felt that she needed a fresh start to move on from her grief. As the head of the family, he decided to arrange her marriage. Mira was given no choice. She got married to a wealthy businessman in Chicago. After that, her brother Aaron moved abroad, chasing his dreams in the UK. Their old family home was left empty. Years passed, and their father never visited the house again. Aaron settled down, married a European woman, and had a son. Mira, too, got busy with her own family life. She was now the mother of 2 daughters and a son. Her husband loved her, and they had a happy home. Slowly, the grief and pain from her mother's loss faded away, though she still occasionally spoke to her brother, and they grew closer after their mother's death. Even with her busy life, Mira had moments when she missed her mother deeply. Today was one of those days. From the morning, she had felt her absence. She went to the closet where she kept some of her mother's things, items that were precious memories. As she flipped through the photos, a sudden urge came over her to visit her childhood home, her mother's home, which she hadn't seen in years. The last time she had been there was when her brother lived there before leaving for the UK. Since then, the house had been locked up, gathering dust. Mira wanted to visit the house and feel her mother's presence again. She immediately called her husband and told him of her desire to visit her childhood home in Seattle. He agreed and promised to book her a train ticket for the next day. Early the following morning, Mira took the train. Her husband reassured her that the children would be well cared for while she was away. The Seattle-bound train sped along the tracks. As the hours passed, Mira lost herself in her memories. Before she knew it, her station arrived. She quickly grabbed her luggage and hailed a taxi to her mother's house. Although no one lived there anymore, her excitement grew as she got closer. The town still looked the same: green trees, ponds, and palm trees. The familiar sights and smells of her childhood town brought her joy. As she walked to the house, some people recognized her and waved. Mira smiled and waved back, grateful for the welcome. When she finally arrived at the house, she stood in front of it, filled with anticipation. What secrets would her mother's diary hold? She unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The house looked exactly as she remembered, but the years of dust and cobwebs were a clear sign that it had been abandoned. She wandered through each room, feeling the memories wash over her. In her mother's bedroom, she found the old closet where her mother had hidden the diary. It wasn't locked anymore. Slowly, she opened it and found some of her mother's neatly folded dresses. Beneath the clothes, she found the diary. It was covered in a red cardboard cover, worn with age. It had been 15 years since her mother had passed, and the diary hadn't been touched since. Mira carefully opened the diary and saw that the first page was blank. She turned to the next page, where she saw her mother had written the story of her life, rather than dated entries. Mira was surprised to see her mother writing in such good English, as she had never heard her speak the language fluently. But Mira remembered her mother reading English newspapers and magazines. As she read, she discovered her mother had more talent and potential than she had ever let on, but she had kept it hidden for some reason. Mira began reading her mother's words. "My life has given me so much, but there is still this emptiness that haunts me. Inside I feel so alone and scared. I wish he could have understood my love and stayed with me. My children are my joy, but there's a truth I haven't shared with them. I don't know if I ever will. Mira and Aaron are my treasures, and I don't want them to hate me for mistakes I made in the past." Mira paused, feeling a wave of sadness. She had been crying while reading her mother's story. She never knew how much her mother had gone through. Mira had lived a much better life. If only her mother had shared these secrets when she was alive. Mira would have hugged her and said, "Mom, I love you so much. I don't blame you for anything in the past or now. You are my mother, and that's all that matters." But it was too late to say this. The pain her mother carried had been buried with her. Reading more, Mira now understood why no relatives ever visited them. Her mother used to say, "I have no brothers or sisters, and your grandparents are in heaven. So we don't have other family." Both Mira and her brother, Aaron, believed their mother. She was their whole world, and they were happy with her. Now, Mira had learned about Aaron's birth and her mother's past. But she wanted to know more, so she kept reading the diary. "Fate had more surprises for me, ones I never imagined. One normal day, I was doing housework when I noticed a shadow at the door. I looked up and couldn't believe it. It was him, Vipin. He was standing there after all those years. I froze, unsure what to do. My heart raced with both happiness and fear. Should I let him in or tell him to leave? Before I could decide, he walked in and hugged me tightly. I couldn't resist. All the anger I had felt disappeared. I cried like a child in his arms, letting out all the pain I had hidden for years. Aaron, a little toddler, came over and held on to us. I saw in Vipin's eyes how happy he was to finally meet his son. From that day, things changed between us. Vipin started visiting more often, and I accepted it the way he wanted. We silently agreed. He wouldn't leave me, but he wouldn't leave his wife either. Since they had no children together, I felt like I had one in a way. His bond with Aaron brought him back to our house in Seattle many times. Our love grew stronger, and 3 years later I had a daughter, Mira. Mira stopped for a moment, shocked by what she read. All these years, she had disliked the woman her father lived with, thinking of her as the other woman. She thought that woman was the reason her father didn't live with them. Now she knew the truth. Her mother, Rachel, was Vipin's mistress, and Aaron and Mira were the children of their secret relationship. Mira felt ashamed. She hid her face in her hands and cried. Feeling both sad and guilty, Mira eventually calmed herself. She had always been angry with her father and never spoke to him kindly. As a teen, she wondered why he even came to visit them. She would ask her mother, "Why do you let him come here? If he cared, he'd live with us, not with that other woman." Her mother would always reply, "Mira, remember he is your father. One day, you'll understand how much he loves you and your brother." Mira closed her eyes, thinking of the past. She remembered one time when her father tried to talk to her. He had taken her to the small garden they had. He wanted to spend some time with her. Mira could still hear his words. "Mira, your mother and I are so proud of you. You've grown into a lovely young woman like her. Makes me worry about your future. I want you to have a loving husband who will cherish you. When that happens, I'll feel at peace." He placed his hand on her head, but Mira pulled away and said, "If you really cared, you wouldn't have left us. You'd either take us with you or stay here. I don't want your fake love." That memory weighed heavy on Mira now. She took deep breaths, but the guilt was strong. Her heart ached, but Mira remembered her mother teaching her to be strong. She collected herself and picked up the diary, ready to finish it. There were only a few pages left. After Mira was born, something changed in me. I wanted Vipin to make our relationship official. I wanted to be his wife, not just the mother of his children. But every time I asked, he said no. Our talks turned into arguments, and we drifted apart. I realized I wasn't his true love. He would never leave his wife, Sugandha. She was the love of his life. I felt used, like a toy that had served its purpose. My life felt heavy. Sometimes I thought of ending it all, but I couldn't leave my kids behind. They needed me, so I stayed. I knew one day they would ask why their father didn't live with us. I might not have an answer, but I hope that when they learn the truth, they will forgive me. I wasn't a bad woman or a bad mother. I just made a mistake. Each page brought more emotions for Mira. She felt pity, anger, sadness, and confusion. Her mother's hidden story was now revealed. Mira finally understood why her mother always seemed lost in her thoughts. She touched the pages, imagining her mother's silent tears. This diary had been left for her on purpose. Mira kept reading. The final page was addressed to her. "Mira, I've seen you peeking in at me while I write. I know you've always wanted to know what I was writing. I've left this diary for you to read when the time is right. One day, you'll be a grown woman with your own family. By then I may be gone. But when you read this, I hope you understand that your father isn't the man you thought he was. He loves you and Aaron more than anything. Life doesn't always go as we plan. Your father and I made mistakes, but we tried our best. Vipin wasn't my husband, but he never abandoned us. My own expectations created the distance between us. Despite everything, I always loved him, and my world began and ended with him and both of you, my precious children. I wrote this diary to tell you what I couldn't say out loud. Please, Mira, understand that adults sometimes make mistakes they can't undo. But from this relationship, I was blessed with you and Aaron. I love you both more than anything. When you finish reading this, I hope you can forgive me and your father. Keep loving me as you always have. Mom. Mira flipped through the remaining pages, but they were blank. Her tears fell freely, but this time they weren't tears of anger or sadness. She felt lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted. She stood up and went to her mother's picture on the wall. She wiped the dust from it and bowed her head in respect. Before she knew it, morning had come. It was 7 a.m., and she had spent the entire night reading. Mira packed her things, took one last look at her mother's garden, and left. The roses were gone. She took the diary, locked the door, and got into the waiting taxi. As the car pulled away, Mira glanced back at the house. Deep down, she knew this might be her last visit. By 4 p.m. the next day, Mira arrived back in Chicago. Her husband was waiting, and they drove home together. During the ride, Myra's mind was restless. She couldn't stop thinking. After a lot of thought, she made a decision. She would publish her mother's life story. After 3 years of effort, the book was published. She called it The Ingrown Sapling. Mira changed the names to protect her mother's story. The book became a bestseller, and on the last page Mira wrote a note. Her heart was as deep as the ocean, her soul pure as gold. She was our mother, our goddess. Thanks to the diary, Mira had healed her relationship with her father. They spoke often, and their bond grew. But Mira decided to keep the diary a secret from her husband and her brother, Aaron. There was no need for them to know. Now Mira felt at peace. After reading the diary, she loved her mother even more.